Hello and welcome to Unmasked, where we peek behind the scenes of an upcoming tabletop role-playing game, Daemonologie. The game is a work in progress, so rules may change, but the stories will remain.
I'm Chavonne, my pronouns are he, him.
And I'm Alex, my pronouns are he and they.
And what did we cover last time, Alex?
Well, we had a little look at the history that defines this period. We went properly in depth on the professions, and we had a proper look at our favourite talents and specialities. And we had a chat with Izzy and Digby, who are illustrating some of the lovely people that we might see in the game.
And we receive more and more exciting illustrations every single day.
Oh, we really do.
It's
so cool.
Just can't wait for people to see my favourite kind of shoe.
With a little poms on it.
Little pom-pom court shoes.
So yeah, what are we going to talk about today, Chavonne?
We are talking about the six planes. The dreaming and the fae. Now, the six planes in our game describes the cosmology of the universe.
Yeah, as understood by the narrow-minded English at the time.
Always a caveat in the game. Things are understood as those people in the British Isles understand them to be in the 17th century.
Yeah, we're not sort of like providing a comprehensive worldview, because a comprehensive worldview has definitely not reached the British Isles in 1606. Occasionally it's surprising what has reached, but mostly, nah. Then, with our mechanics talk, we're going to go in depth on two of the planes that your characters might visit. And, well, we visited one in the actual play so far, so that's hype.
I'm always very hyped to visit the other planes.
So let's crack on with it. So today we're going to be looking at the six planes, and the first plane that is most important to talk about is the Mundane, which is our plane, the plane of existence where the world, Mundus, exists on. So these are the countries and the continents that are understood to exist. So, you know, the quote-unquote new world of the Americas is still being discovered, and just now, at the time of the game, people are starting to set foot from Europe, which will historically be a terrible, terrible time. And then we're starting in Europe to understand the stretches just at the top of Africa before we reach the deserts that separates the North and South Africa, and we're starting to learn more about East Asia just at this time. Which, you know, also historically, all of these things are going to be a bad time for the rest of the world.
Yeah. This is. I can only describe it as the start of the European imperial period. It is.
It's
going to be bad for everywhere else.
And, you know, companies are going to be leading the charge. Companies behind countries. But anyway, that's this is why we now retreat to the other planes of existence, because they're not nicer, are they? But they're fictionalized, which makes them much nicer.
And they don't have capitalism.
No, they don't. I mean, we have talked about the pacts and their capitalist representation, but so I think the important thing is, first, you exist on the Mundane. The Mundane exists as the place that we recognize it, but there are these other planes of existence, and yeah, how does that cosmology work? How do people travel between these planes?
You can travel between planes thusly. You can, when you go to sleep. Everyone does.
the most mundane form of planar travel is what your mind does every night.
It's just dreaming. You dream and you enter your own individual dreamscape, and that's a kind of planar travel. You may also hop onto a fairy road to get to where the fairies live. You may use, in the game, specialities. Certain kinds of spell can let you travel between planes. Certain kinds of towns can let you see people that have been to different planes. You can die if you'd like to go to a different plane.
Yeah, not only does everybody do it every night, everyone does it at one point forever. I like to think of sort of the way that planes exist as sort of occasionally there are these semi-permeable membranes that a bit like Halloween, the veil is meant to get looser and sort of like easier to cross over for spirits and demons. There are just sort of like places in the world and times in the world where that happens and that is able to take place. And so we're going to cover a lot of those, and we're going to cover all of those planes that are common to a European understanding at this time, and a European understanding from this game's perspective. So Chavonne, the most important one that isn't the mundane, the one that sort of frames this game.
We have the Hells. I am going to again reference one of our greatest reference pieces in the game, at least in these podcasts, the Buffyverse.
I was like, he could either go for Dante or Buffy.
And I'm going to come to Dante after I've come to Buffy. I'm going to go for the highest brow and then the slightly lower brow of Dante.
What, that fanfic that Dante wrote about?
That fanfic that Dante wrote about some woman that he was honestly simping. Renaissance simping.
This is the hot take that Dante is actually Buffy fanfic.
The Hells, well, they are where people go when they die if they are wicked, as is believed in some religious systems and some faith systems. For us, they are simply a place where demons and Hellions reside. Demons are fallen creatures of heaven, whilst Hellions are those native to the Hells. We make that distinction also in the game. But where is the devil? The devil is in the 9 circles. There we are, there's our Dante. Ruling over them as an empire. And within the 9 circles, each circle has its own king.
Yeah, it's just some pretty bad demons right there. The structure of the Hells, as we've talked about previously, has a semi sort of feudal structure of it just goes down and down and down. If you got the empire, you got the kings, you got the dukes and counts and all of that good horror.
For any fans of the Holy Roman Empire, it functions sort of like that.
I've got to say, I love how in this. How in this, when we talk about things, it's like, are you a fan of Buffy or the Holy Roman Empire? That's just what this game's about.
It's about Buffy and the Imperial Diet. But opposite to the Hells, we have...
Yeah, the Heavens. And so there's a bit of a problem with the Heavens in that they're unknowable. They are a space up there, or maybe not up there, maybe somewhere else, maybe inside yourself. The heaven was the friends we made along the way. It's the Heavens are deliberately ambiguous because people who go there don't come back, and the things that come out of there are reluctant to speak of heaven apart from in broad sort of allegorical terms. It's occasionally a wonderful paradise, and occasionally it's just a place like any other, another sort of type of the world. And the creatures that come out of there, the angels, they might come down to the world, but they're usually going to have some very strange and deliberate purpose, and not going to talk very much outside of that.
They're not chatty.
No.
Demons are very chatty. Angels are not.
Much like the hells, the heavens are broken up into tons and tons and tons of different regions, we would assume. But generally just got to hammer home that point of it's a big question mark up there. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how it comes down, and we don't know why it comes down. Because, occasionally there are miracles, and, occasionally the miracles are disputed, as they are in our timeline, but miracles definitely exist. It's just the question of why they're given, when they're given, and what reason are they given for?
It's all just sort of random angelic nonsense, as far as humans can tell.
Yeah, as far as humans can tell, they don't know what those angels are doing, but I'm sure the angels know. And then we come to a place that is, I think the Otherworld is close to the heavens. The Otherworld has Celtic roots, and it is where the Fae live. It is a heightened pastoral green land. And, like any other realm, it has its own biomes and different weather climates. But it is home to two very distinct kingdoms, and that is the kingdom of the Seelie and the Unseelie. Essentially, the good Fae and the bad Fae. The Seelie generally have positive relations with humanity, and the Seelie generally think that humans are little playthings who are funny to hit about and do mischief to. There's one main way. The Otherworld is one of the first planes that we're talking about where you can visit in the game, and one of the main ways is that there are roads that have existed in Celtic lands that lead to the Otherworld, and so you can just go down one road and then find yourself, oh, I'm in the Otherworld. Whoops! This is probably bad. Maybe I'm going to live here forever. Time moves in a very different way. Maybe you're going to find yourself in a Seelie court and then come out 300 years later into a timeline that you know nothing about.
Which is,
saying, I don't know where I am.
We can only call the Irish folklore gambit, where you go somewhere in the Fae, you vanish for a century, everyone you know is dead, and your castle has fallen down. You get off your horse, and then you suddenly die.
Yeah, well, I think there's also this element of the Fae, in that almost angel-like sense, have a sort of curiosity for humans, but don't really understand how they function, because they essentially live for inordinately long periods of time, more than humans do. So they find just all of those petty squabbles either endearing or infuriating, depending if you're Seelie or Unseelie.
And there is technically in the game only one kind of Unseelie who actively detests humanity, but that's more of a generational beef thing.
Yeah, like the Unseelie you can still make friends with. It's just that they're more likely to try and fuck with you. So next we get to the other plane that is very visitable, and also somewhere where we go quite often.
It's the dreaming. Everyone goes to the dreaming when they fall asleep. The dreaming is the collective subconscious and unconscious mind of every sapient being in the goddamn universe. Which is a whole bunch. People normally sit safely in their own dreamscapes, which is their own mind when they fall asleep. Stepping out of your dreamscape into the wild dreaming is normally a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Because sitting out in the wild dreaming, we have what are called Primal Factors. Primal Factors are sort of like allegorized concepts that don't have consciousness as we understand it, but they do think. They don't recognize waking minds. So, as Inquisitors, you can travel to the dreaming. We'll come to that later. Traveling to the dreaming as a waking mind normally gets you noticed by the things that don't really see consciousness very much. And they are, for instance, the Genia that we had appear in actual play, the Great Hand Tree. Allegorized kindness that would have destroyed us with kindness, torn us apart with its little grasping hands, trying to be nice to us.
I think for the primal factors, it's just consciousness just hits different. And you're like, oh, that's new. I want to touch that, but I'm an incredibly ancient being that only has ridiculous power and feeling and emotion, and so the dream tree just gets hold of you, tears you apart because it doesn't know what you are. It's just like, ooh, this is fleshy and elasticy. It's they're maybe not trying to do harm. I imagine some are trying to do harm.
I've always imagined the dreaming sort of like being the old 60s Doctor Strange comic books. That's what the inside of the dreaming looks like.
Yeah, totally. That's one of my frames of reference is that now I've only seen the film, but that bit where they go into the mirror world with Mads Mikkelsen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's I vibe a bit with that, but also the fade from Dragon Age. That's I'm always going there. But next to the dreaming, or just sort of like outside it, or just beyond it,
is the place beyond. Now, the place beyond, if heaven is unknowable, the place beyond is literally unfathomable.
Yeah, if you went to the heavens, you might go like, oh, I get it now. If you went to the place beyond, you'd go like, I'm more confused.
I don't understand. Physics is nonsense. Not even inverted, just nonsense here. Just squiggly space-time nonsense. Everything is constantly being born and dying at the same time. Everything is inverted and exverted. Everything is exploded and being remade. And there are just terrifying eldritch horrors that live here. As we've spoken of before, the bleak ones. The bleak ones also exist in the dreaming, but that's like their dreaming minds exist in the dreaming, and their physical bodies are in the place beyond.
Yeah, so we've talked a bit about the thaumaturge's magic before, one of the professions in the game, and the way that they get their magic of miracles is they ask the bleak ones to remember those miracles, and then they manifest in the mundane. This is the sort of ridiculous, unfathomable power of the creatures that live here. And so, they simultaneously exist in the place beyond. They exist also unconsciously in the dreaming. And if they think about the mundane, which they have been watching forever, then they manifest things in the mundane.
They are triple beings.
They're everywhere. They're nowhere. Don't pick a fight with them. Speaking of...
We do have a few monsters that originate in the place beyond that shouldn't be here. They just shouldn't be here.
They're tipping on the legendary scale if you listen to our mechanics talk about monsters, and they're just terrifying. They're just full out terrifying.
We have the Nightmare Dragon, which isn't really a dragon, but the people of 17th century Britain can only sort of describe the shape they're seeing as being a dragon.
Thing that flies through the air and breathes out death. Dragon! And then you've got the Ephialtes, which we chatted about with Mo as well, of just Dream Kraken.
Dream Kraken. It's the Dream Kraken. How did it get here? Oh, by accident. It should probably go back.
Yeah, try and get it to go back. Otherwise, just evacuate the village. But maybe... no, it'll follow the consciousness.
And it doesn't hate us. It just doesn't really comprehend.
It's like a person walking into an orchard and going like, oh look, an apple. But it's a dream kraken wandering into the mundane and looking, there's a consciousness. There's one way in which the place beyond can manifest in the mundane, and that's if thaumaturges get a bit fucky with their magic, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some bad stuff starts to happen and manifest from the place beyond because you shouldn't be drawing on that power too much, because if you draw on that power, as I said, it's a bad place. Bad place is going to be there.
And we've got one last plane. You will notice here that we've in fact counted 7 planes and not 6, but that's again the inaccuracies of the 17th century.
Mm-hmm. The place beyond, I don't think that counts. I think that's something that they were confused about and just went like, that's outside.
It's over there.
So the other plane that we refer to is the 8 realms of Norse mythology. Now these are known from Britain for a number of reasons. Firstly, because Britain has a very Assassin's Creed Valhalla will show you. Britain has been colonized time and time again by tons and tons of different people. First the Romans, and then the Vikings came along and brought their Norse mythology, and so we're just like sister folklore, where we talk about Norse mythology as occasionally one time being a part of the British Isles. And I think the 8 realms also has a closeness to the Otherworld, which has its Celtic roots in the British Isles. And then finally, as written by many reputable historical sources, giants used to live on the British Isles before the Romans came, of course.
Yes.
Because that's if you go to historical sources from the 1600s, they will all tell you, yes, there used to be giants here. I'm deadly serious.
Inexplicably giants from the Holy Land somehow.
Oh, yeah, totally. And so the 8 realms is home to a lot of giants. And the giants having a history in Britain leads sort of like a closeness between those realms. The 8 realms also have this quality of crossing across all of the other planes. There are realms that exist within the hells. There are realms that exist within the heavens. There are realms that are part of the Otherworld, and there are realms that are the Mundane. And so the 8 realms have this quality of being a part of everything. And sort of, if you wanted to take an elevator ride from the heavens to the Otherworld to the hells, you might want to go through the 8 realms.
They keep their own laws there.
There's just this tree on the side of the plains, and it crosses over all of them. Don't worry about it. You don't want to wake the Nidhogg or Jomungandr. Just stay away.
We've also clarified that probably the reason that the devil in the 9 hells doesn't make trouble with the 8 realms is because it would be bad for him. He would get punked.
Mm-hmm. There's a big snake and a big dragon that lives on that tree.
But as we have said, these are the planes as they are understood in 17th century England. There are other planes that we have not mentioned. We have the Greco-Roman underworld, which we have not yet touched on. We have.
I see that as another sort of spiral.
Yeah.
Leading down. You go through Tartarus, you end up in the House of Hades, living down there at the bottom. There's a nice little set of rivers all leading all the way down.
We have different planes as they are imagined by religions from outside of Europe. And we have the cold and hot hells of Buddhism. We have Mount Olympus, which is technically in the Mundane, just really, really high up.
Yeah, I think you climb to Mundane Mount Olympus, and then you see another big mountain, and you go like, oh, that's where the gods live. Oh, have I passed off over to another plane? Yeah. Yeah, I guess I have.
Yeah, I suppose I have.
I'm going to go back down the mountain now and not bother about that.
But those don't really have an impact on play. Things that do have an impact on play, we will come to very shortly. We are going to talk now about how 2 of the planes in the game function mechanically. They're the 2 planes that you can reach the easiest, one of them, of course, being the Dreaming, and the other being the Fae, or Otherworld. Now, Nick Wilcox, take it away.
So I think the first thing to start with is there is one speciality in the game, which allows planar travel. So this is Viatorum Signum, which is possessed by the Ritualist, which is essentially a teleportation circle that can be used across planes. Now, we have put in the text here, and I'll just read it out. The destination may be on another plane, such as the Otherworld or in the Dreaming. Planar travel, however, should be cautioned. Travelling to the heavens, hells, or place beyond is likely to be one way, and travel to the realm of smokeless fire, which we didn't mention, will cause instant incineration for any human traveller. Now, generally this should sort of give the vibe of, like, in this game, you go to the Dreaming or the Otherworld as the places that you may casually visit. It's possible to put the 8 realms in there, but any sort of journey to the Hells or the place beyond should be reserved for very high level campaigns. If you wanna just sort of like homebrew some of that, it's just dangerous.
Very, very, very dangerous.
So when Dante wrote his fanfic, he was writing a very high rank Daemonologie scenario where he soloed the Hells. And you know what? Cool for you, Dante. But, like, it's not really mechanically supported.
And I will say it again, he did it to be a simp.
So let's talk about these 2 realms that we can visit and how you visit them, because it's not as limited as you just cast Viatorum Signum and that's the only way in. You can only be a ritualist to do it. There are some other methods of getting entry.
The easiest method of entering the Dreaming is with Dream Entry. Dream Entry is a ritual taught to all Inquisitors. Everyone can do it. If you have ever viewed American Horror Story Coven, you may be familiar with the spell Deshensum. It's like that, except you Deshensum into someone's mind.
I actually have no idea what this is, but I'm gonna wildly imagine. I watched, like, this is tangential, but I watched like 2 seasons of American Horror Story. And one of them was that suburban one.
The very
Cult?
first one, Murder House.
No.
You watched it just like...
Oh yeah, I just
zip.
picked up a season. And it was... anyway, weird. What you get through Dream Entry is you have to roll your Dreamcraft, which is one of your skills. And for each success that you get a veil for the party. Now, veils are broken when you fail tests in the Dreaming. And when all of your veils are gone, a Primal Factor has seen you. Now, but firstly, before we get to those factors and how bad that can be, Dreamcraft as a skill, what does that do?
Dreamcraft as a skill in itself allows you to make changes within the Dreaming. This is Renaissance Inception, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The more skilled you are at Dreamcraft, the more that you can actually alter the world of the dream. You can do small things like pulling apart walls, making yourself real tiny. You can make yourself real big. You can give yourself wings if you're better at Dreamcraft. You can make things come to life.
You can make your hands have real good grip.
Real good grip.
You can imagine anything when you're in the dream, such as hands having real good grip.
And I didn't... In my heart, I knew that he would try to do something like scale that cathedral. We have been playing with our illustrators, and we had the most powerful kind of dream manipulation happen, an upheaval to try to get out of the dream real quickly, where you tear apart the dream itself.
Yeah, there are lots of ways in which you can utilize Dreamcraft, and the limits is quite literally your imagination of, I also ran a game where somebody turned themselves into the big bad wolf to try and blow away a pile of bricks that was in fact a bugbear in disguise. the confrontations in the dreaming take on this quality of you can at any point dreamcraft and use that as a way of manipulating your surroundings, giving yourself advantages, or building up powerful attacks using these situational moves, essentially. And an important thing about confrontations in the dreaming is if you have broken through your veils, then a factor is going to be a part of that confrontation. They're going to act in the turn order just like you or the monsters would, and they are going to make some moves on each turn. They're going to try and, we talked previously about the intentions of a factor, but they're going to make a few moves, essentially, and each turn they're going to separate people, they're going to harm people, they're going to attempt to madden or bewitch people, or they'll attempt to ensnare people. They'll do all of these things, and, if you're lucky, they may target the monster as well as you. Yeah, that's luck. I mean, yeah, like if you're listening to the actual play, imagine that tree with all the tiny hands coming down. That's not going to be good for the bugbear either.
They're disrupting. They're massively disrupting the state of play. And perhaps your mind.
A little bit, it's your unconscious mind that's in there, so it's your unconscious mind that's going to get torn apart by the hand tree.
Characters can also be saved from ensnaring, from maddening and bewitching, from separation, though it will be a separate task entirely to do so.
Yeah, that's if somebody gets taken by a primal factor, get prepared for doing a big ass journey into the dreaming to try and get them back, because that's the wild dreaming. That's bad. Just try not to put yourself in that situation, really.
It is wisest normally just to get out as quickly as you can once you see a primal factor coming.
Yeah, just get the fuck out of there. So the other plane that we could visit, the Otherworld.
The Otherworld is the realm of the Fae. We have spoken of the Seelie and the Unseelie. But how do we reach the Otherworld?
Yeah, the main way of going to the Otherworld is a ferry road. So, if you're a medium for a scenario, you might include a ferry road. I have a few times before, just to allow people to get into the Otherworld if you plan for that to be a part of the setting of the scenario that you want to play. Otherwise, Feybound can open ferry roads to give them quick shortcuts that pass through the Otherworld as a way of getting somewhere without spending too much time. Because, as we've spoken about previously, the time in the Otherworld acts quite weirdly. Now, so we've got a table of things that could randomly happen while you're doing a ferry travail. Chavonne, do you want to just give me a random number 1 to 3, and then a random number 1 to 6?
I'm going to go for a 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go for a 4.
Okay, so when you pass into a ferry road, you get a sort of like a random occurrence, and a 2 and a 4. It's a very good choice. A Cluricorn challenges the most impressive-looking guest to a wrestling match. Cluricorns are the drunk, fighty cousins of leprechauns. If refused, the Cluricorn names the whole party to be no better than Belgian cowards, and everyone's fitness is reduced by 1 for a day. If accepted and won, everyone's fitness is increased by 1 for 3 days. If lost, the whole party's fitness is reduced by 1 for 3 days. Now, so it's small little things like that can have an impact on the rest of your journey. And yeah, they're silly, they're weird, they're inspired by Celtic tales.
Sometimes it can be a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, sometimes just a weird thing happens on the ferry road. But there is another kind of way to tangle with fairies, apart from just walking on their transport systems.
Yeah, ferry roads are the ferry highways.
Very inefficient highways, actually, for anyone who isn't a fairy.
Yeah.
They are a special kind of challenge. As we've said, the Fae regard humans as amusing curiosities. And when they encounter you, they may decide that, you know what, I'm gonna tell you something important about something you've been struggling with currently. But what it's going to involve is a series of tests, usually doing something very dependent upon the Inquisitor themselves, and in a very strange location. One fairy challenge I remember was with my character of Benedict. I went inside of a big tree whilst a fairy party was going on, and had to go through a series of challenges with a cobbly now to get myself a big fairy halberd and some information about the demon's hand.
So that leads us to the types of Seelie and Unseelie they are. We're going to come to the Unseelie in a second, but the Seelie are mostly interactive with through the Feybound. The Feybound has a number of fairy patrons that they can pick from, and so those fairy patrons is Queen Mab, who was invented by Shakespeare, but is the sort of Galadriel-esque in my mind.
Yeah.
Beautiful, powerful queen. It passes out cruel judgments at the same time as hosts elegant parties. You've got the Morrigan. Chavonne, do you want to talk a little bit about the Morrigan?
The Morrigan has been described as, that's just hot. But
it's so true.
She is triple aspected. She is a warrior god of the Fae. She has sort of a crossover with the Celtic gods. Again, the Otherworld is a strange place. So many of the old Celtic gods also live in the Otherworld, sort of having retired there once they stopped being worshipped very much. She brings death. She brings war. She brings discord. And you can imagine her as the destructive forces of nature marshaled into a single fairy queen.
I gotta say, gods being able to retire is probably the best deal that gods get in all pantheons I've heard. Where it's just like, oh yeah, you get to retire to the nice place. Yeah, fucking A.
Yeah, absolutely.
Usually I just get to fade away.
Oh, but Wilcox, there is but one more patron.
Oh, yes, of course. The final patron is the King of Cats. Essentially a giant cat who once upon a time tricked and beguiled their way into their position in the fairy courts, now holding great power and just using that power to eat well and live quietly.
You can imagine them sort of like the Cheshire Cat.
Yeah, very much like the Cheshire Cat. I think about like the there's a covenant in Dark Souls with just like a nice cat sitting in a little nook and cranny, and it's just like, yeah, that's what we want. That's the life. And so each patron has a court of fairy summons that they can make, and we'll just talk about some of our favorites here because it's always fun to talk about our favorites. I picked one favorite overall.
Oh, go on then.
Which is actually one that you mentioned, the Cobbler now. So the reason, and yeah, they are also Queen Mab's court. So I really like them because they're squat, muscular mining spirits, and I generally in games always play dwarves because I'd like, well, behind the scenes I'm 6'4", but I just got an affinity with those bad boys. And so the Cobbler now is like a squat, muscular mining spirit. They're brilliant metallurgists, and they're essentially the shock troopers for Queen Mab. They're brilliant, powerful dudes with hammers and shields, and I love them.
Very fair. My favourite is he's in the King of Cats court. Can you guess who he is?
Is it the King Otter?
It's the King Otter.
Yes.
The King Otter is what it sounds like. He's a fairy otter wearing a little fairy crown. He acts as patron not to humans, but to small animals, so voles and such.
So yeah, like you can have a patron being Mab or the Morrigan or the King of Cats, but you can't have the King Otter because he does little voles. Little voles want magic, and the King Otter's like, yeah,
absolutely. Otters want magic. Voles want magic. You there, beaver? You can have magic. So I love him because of this. I also love that he just can beat anyone. If he's in water, he can just beat anyone.
He's a king. He's a king. He's the king of that water. So Chavonne, the magic that comes out of the Otherworld, what does that look like?
Well, we've got 3 stripes of magic here. We have magic of creation, so magic that's life-giving, magic that changes. We have magic of illusion, magic that obscures and warps, and we have elemental magic, magic that can give you features of the elements and the destructive force of nature. Now, those are arranged by gifts, and these gifts fall under powers within those courts. Some of these powers, I think some of my favourite powers, well, I talked about Mount of the Gods, and how it allows you to summon a big snail.
Just like in the manuscript.
Just like in the manuscripts. And that combines Yachau and Gruned. Yachau being the power over life force, and Gruned being the power over forming matter. You put together life force and forming matter, and you can summon an enlarged snail. You can also summon Sleipnir if you want, but I'd be summoning the enlarged snail.
So the gifts are possessed by the Feybounds, but it's also a representation of the magic that the Otherworld possesses. And this leads us to the other side, the reverse side of the coin of the Unseelie, who live in the other realm, or the other part of the Otherworld. So the Unseelie can come into your scenarios if you make a trip through the Otherworld that doesn't go well, and you leave a door open. The Unseelie might pop through because they want a bit of mischief. Otherwise, there might be a few Unseelie there already, mostly because they might be familiar with the area, or just generally live in the Mundane, or live near a ferry road next to the Mundane. They might just have some business in that area. And so the general reasons why they might be in the scenario are always up to you. And they shouldn't necessarily just always be antagonists, because they do have... they're not under the control of the demon's hand. And they always hate black magic a bit more than they hate humans.
Yeah.
They find humans, reprehensible, silly, infantile, and fun to fuck with, but black magic they find as
just disgusts
sort of
them.
Sworn enemy disgusts them.
Yeah. So there's no reason that if you come across, let's say, a Cluricorn, or even perhaps maybe even some rat boys, and you say to them, "We have a witch problem," they might be like, "A witch? Show me where."
There's a wide range of Unseelie. They're included within the monsters that we talked about in episode 2, and so they're given that possibility that you can fight with them, or you can ally with them, and you can find a way to work with them. And I think that's our little look at the different planes and the different things that can come about through those planes.
I think it is.
Hello, we are back, and today we're going to be interviewing another one of our lovely members of the team. So, Tasha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Natasha Soffler. I use she/her pronouns, and I'm the composer for Daemonologie.
Lovely. So you've already given us the lovely music that will have just been heard, and will be about to be heard in a little bit. But we're hoping that if the Kickstarter does well, we're going to have a little bit of money put into one of the stretch goals. In fact, I believe the first stretch goal, planning ahead, to get a full soundtrack that you can play while you're playing, which will be very exciting. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat and chat a bit about the process of making the music that you've had so far, and sort of like what the inspirations were. But firstly, you've played a bit with us. How's playing given you sort of inspiration, or let you understand the game, or given sort of inspiration for the music that we've got to hear?
It's been really useful. So I've loved playing so far. Find it a lot of fun. And from a musical perspective, I found it really useful because basically just understanding the mechanics of the game, understanding the kind of, for want of a better word, just the feel of it all, and also just how gameplay works. So the kind of scenarios that are likely to come up and how they play out in gameplay, or how they can play out. I suppose every game is different, but it's given me a really good idea of that kind of thing, which in turn will help with making the music. And just give me an idea of what I'm writing for, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Who are you playing? What's your character?
My character is called Arabella Dreadnought. Her name sounds like she's a pirate, but she's not a pirate. That's an insight into my brain, because that is just the name that came into my head. But she is a kind of scholarly person. Her parents died under mysterious circumstances, and she went to live with an eccentric uncle who had this vast library of lots of books and artefacts from far-flung places. So she spent her days kind of reading and examining all of those things, so she has some rather eclectic knowledge. Yeah.
So, I remember distinctly when we first were chatting about sort of like inspirations, Chavonne and I had just pretty much in the background been playing at that point the Witcher 3 soundtrack on repeat.
Almost ceaselessly, so much so that Witcher 3 tracks came up in my Spotify most played of that year. Yeah.
Yeah, I had exactly the same problem. And then eventually it was just like endless Vardruna. Probably butchering the pronunciation, but yeah, it was. We had very little scope at that point, but then we started thinking out. So when we sent you this vast list of whatever we'd been listening to, what really sort of like sprung for you, and what gave you the inspirations? Because it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like Witcher, it doesn't sound like Vardruna. It feels like it's very much got its own sound. So what provided those inspirations, and what brought you here?
Well, kind of a lot of different things. So I listened to obviously sort of the music that you sent me, the plays that you sent me, and I kind of tried to draw from different areas of that. So I tend to find when I'm writing, I don't like to listen to just one sort of one composer or one soundtrack repeatedly, because then I find myself copying it accidentally. Mm-hmm. So I sort of deliberately didn't over-listen, if that makes sense. But I did try and take kind of certain key elements. So in terms of the kind of vocal elements and the more sort of, that can give the more kind of demonic feel. So I've got the low bass drones and the humming. But then also in the music that you hear at the end of the podcast, the end credits music, that has a slightly more kind of action feel. So I sort of tried to take different elements from different places. I also took inspiration from something outside of that list, which is also The Witcher, but the TV series of The Witcher that's on Netflix, because I really love that soundtrack. And I basically want to emulate it in every way possible without plagiarizing. So I took some inspiration from that as well, and that came across in the kind of more sound designy type aspects of it. So the whispering, particularly, that's in the introductory track, things like that. And then I guess the final sort of facet is from I have a classical background. I'm classically trained. That was what I started off doing. So I tried to put in a few elements of like medieval influence from what I learnt when I was studying classical music history. And I'm hoping to, if we get to the point of writing a full soundtrack, to incorporate more of those elements so that become a little bit more obvious.
Yeah, I think we've had a conversation about how the we had a little bit of a conversation about how the standards of the time that we're operating in, the music that existed then just does not sound like the music that exists now in terms of just like how it's constructed, but also the instruments. So like what I know that I am a complete idiot when it comes to music. Like I used to joke back at school when people were sort of like taking music lessons that I could play the Xbox and that's about it. No instruments out there. So what's a bit of an insight into like how that is different?
So the key difference would be the like harmonic difference. So they used modes then, rather than the kind of major minor system that we have now. So I did incorporate that. I used a mode for the main theme, which is why it might sound a little bit odd, like a little bit off with some of the notes. That was fully intentional, I promise. So there's a little reference there. Also, underlying absolutely everything at the moment is a drone, in a perfect fifth, which was also very, very common at that time. So those are like some of the elements that I took and put into the soundtrack. Obviously, a big one is instrumentation. Now, unfortunately, I don't have access to medieval instruments or people who can play them. So that wasn't something that I really used, but that's another huge difference. So things like even modern string instruments, like they didn't exist in the same way. There weren't any pianos, just everything was just a different version of what we have now. So that's, if you listen to any medieval music or any like reproductions, obviously, of medieval music, that's a big factor. But they did use voice a lot, because a lot of the music written then was sacred music. So that was another
interesting
element.
Very cool. Very cool.
This is all lining up with me reading about the seeming obsession with droning that there seem to have been from like the 12th century to the early modern period. And they're saying, yeah, droning is somehow like heaven.
A lot of those.
People used to love bagpipes. All kinds of bagpipe.
While you've been playing, has a favourite moment for you popped up? Just in what you've played, what's come up, what you've sort of been around, what you've heard in the sort of like the stories as we've been playing and chatting.
I've enjoyed the kind of slightly chaotic elements that can come in. So every time there's been a devil's bargain, that has been absolute gold. I think in our first session there was one that involved a 7-foot tall shepherd. That was hilarious. And that adding on to the previous one that I wasn't part of, but that the story was told to me of a church catching on fire multiple times, and then immediately after this we get a really tall shepherd and some like rabid sheep or something. That was that was pretty funny. I enjoy those kind of chaotic elements a little bit.
Yeah, lovely. I think Izzy and Digby mentioned the sheep as well.
Nice.
It was
very
quite
funny.
And to be fair, like that's my character's fault that I didn't take that one.
It's one of the joys of the game of taking Devil's Bargain and then just a few minutes later seeing something bizarre and saying, "I've probably done this."
I remember Mo was really just broken up that they'd that they'd been the cause of so many problems. Just shrinking away.
In terms of playing Arabella Dreadnought, what's been your favourite moment with her as a character so far?
I actually quite enjoyed when we went into the dream.
Oh,
the guy's
yes.
name I can't remember.
The poet
That
Robert
was
Parry's
fun.
dream.
That's right, Robert Parry's dream. I enjoyed doing that. I got to use a little bit of my magic for kind of the first time, so that was fun. But then also rolled terribly, even though I should have been useful because of my skills. I had Dreamcraft. I should have been really useful in that scenario, and then I rolled really badly and was absolutely useless.
To be fair, you then also rolled incredibly well as soon as we realised it was a very bad time to be in there. We needed a fucking way out immediately, and you got 4 successes over the course of 2 turns, which is
That's true.
It's
pretty
basically
impressive.
unheard of. And you tore apart the sky.
What can I say? Maybe Arabella's more badass than she seems.
So because you're playing a ritualist, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got some crazy wild scientific religious magics to tear apart the seams of reality with.
It's just what I do on the weekend.
Yeah. we've all been there.
Some people call it absinthe.
Yeah, lovely. No, this is so tangential, but I remember the first time I had absinthe, which was when I went into a restaurant. It was a hotel bar, gone midnight, because I missed the last train home, and I had to wait until the bus in the morning, and I said, "I want that one," and he said, "This is absinthe. Are you sure you want this one?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I knew that I was in danger when he put the absinthe in the glass and then took it out. And I was like, "Oh, fuck. I can't even drink that."
I'm not allowed to drink it.
That's very tangential, but you reminded me of it, and I think it's fun. Anyway, I might cut that out. Might put that in.
Well, the first time I had absinthe was my friend had been on holiday somewhere, brought back a big bottle of it in a skull-shaped bottle. So that was fun.
I think one of the most powerful things about absinthe is aura.
Yeah.
Like as soon as it's around you, you're like,
It has a really threatening aura, but it also sort of invites you to doom.
But I really like it because I like licorice.
I remember to share an absinthe story, not my own. Oh no, it was my own. Oh, goodness, look at
That shows you a good absinthe story.
I was simply at a friend's house, and I kept seeing that on the mantle was a bottle of absinthe, and I was like, "I'm going to drink it." They said, "Chavonne, don't do that." I was, I'm definitely going to drink that absinthe. And then no one was looking. I snuck it. Precisely the effect I was hoping for. And then they snatched the bottle from my hand and said, "What have you done?"
Quite literally, like a child in a film who's just done something very bad. What have you done? You know not what you've done. Harry Potter is the beginning of the God of Fire.
Michael Gambon clearly having been on the Absinthe that day of filming.
He wasn't very
Anyway, that little absinthe conversation, nice little note to end on.
Yeah.
Tasha, where can people find you on the internet if they were so inclined?
I have a website, which is www.natashasofla.com, and Sofla spelled Sofla. I'm also on the social medias. I've got a Facebook page, Instagram and Twitter account, and they're all at Natasha Sofla. And I have a SoundCloud, which is also my name again. So yeah, you can listen to me on SoundCloud and on my website and stuff, and yeah, I update when I remember. So
Great. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And look forward to playing again with you soon.
Absolutely.
All that's left for us to say is thank you for tuning in. This has been a bit of a shorter one than last time, which was a monumentally long one, because we got carried away talking about all the things that we love about this game. And so this one's a bit lighter on the mechanics. We're not going too in depth on things, but it's just a bit of an idea about the more wonderful, or awesome, and I mean that in the term of awe-inspiring.
In the old sense.
Yeah, in the old sense, as is everything we say. Elements of this game. And so, yeah, thank you for tuning in this time. We hope you tune in again next time, and we hope that you've been enjoying the actual play as well. The music you heard is by Natasha Sofla, and the graphic design is all done by Oscar Russell of Watchtower Design. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Daemonologie RPG. That's Daemonologie DAE. Ology IE instead of a Y. Daemonologie RPG. You can also email into us, Demonology. Christ. You can email into us, demonologyrpg@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. We might start answering some questions and tacking them onto these.
Yeah, nice. Would be lovely.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see y'all soon.
Bye now.
We are back today with this is a fucking mess. My brain can't keep up with my mouth, and my mouth doesn't know what to do. So sorry. Promise we're professionals sometimes. Well, we're not professionals, we're not being paid. We'll be professionals when it funds.